So I have some interesting news, everybody. Apparently, calling Kamala Harris a cop is racist. This is news to me, okay? Not only is it racist, but according to this article, it is this racist act that caused Kamala to drop out the race. Yeah, as you can see, as a black man, I'm pretty confused by this notion, but let's go ahead and check it out and talk about it. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. Of course, as always, I'm your humble host, Niko House. So, today we have an interesting story to cover because when Kamala dropped out, I just knew somehow, some way, somebody was going to make it about the fact that she was black this election cycle. And when I say this election cycle, I mean because, well, to a lot of people who have been following Kamala since her early days in California as district attorney, they were probably surprised to find out that she was black. Because all she ever talked about was being Indian. The only help she's ever solicited from her family, it's like when she's running for office, has always been from the Indian side. She talks about how much her aunt has helped and contributed to her values. She talked about the fact that her Indian side of the family has helped shape her to be who she is today. In fact, she's made barely, if at all, any mention of her Jamaican side of the family until she decided to run for office. So like I said, a lot of people were surprised to find out she was black, and she was black for the first time in her political career this election cycle. So, this article was written in the Independent. And when I first saw it, when I saw the title, I thought it was an article in the Onion. I'm serious. I know y'all gonna laugh at me, but this is real life. I legitimately thought it was an article in the Onion. It wasn't, though. It was a real article written in the Independent, which I believe is, I believe they're a credible news source. So listen to the title of this. Kamala is a cop was a racist narrative that killed Harris's campaign dead. And whatever you think about her, it's deeply unfair. Shit, that's just the article right there. If apparently, tell me how you really feel. If whatever we think about her is deeply unfair, because you said it is, fuck the facts, whatever. I'm reading that title to you once again. Kamala is a cop was a racist narrative that killed Harris's campaign dead, and whatever you think about her is deeply unfair. Yeah, you know this is about to be good. Let's go ahead and see what this guy has to talk about. Now, I mean, they start off, I mean, with just the platitudes, which, by the way, these particular phrases are true, but it's just weird how you're going to hear him try to apply these truisms to Kamala's campaign. Now, the article starts off by saying, there's a saying that almost every black person in America is familiar with. You have to work two times as hard to be twice as good. And that's a true statement. This phrase has been passed down for generations from parents and grandparents to young black people. It's not just an explanation, it is a warning. America was built for white people, so if black people want something, it will be much harder. I mean, I feel like there should not be any disagreements or debates as far as that's concerned. Like, literally, slaves were building America for their white masters. So, I mean, it's quite literally and figuratively built for white people. Now, obviously, that's changing, and that has zero to do with Kamala's campaign, but let's hear him make his argument. Now, the author goes on to say that this was certainly the case for Senator Kamala Harris. From the moment she announced her plans to run for president in January 2019 on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. Now, I want to go ahead and touch on that real quick. The fact that this author doesn't see a problem with Kamala taking the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday and making it about Kamala Harris instead of the dream from Dr. King. I mean, the fact that he doesn't see the problem with that probably means that I'm not going to take anything you say after this very seriously, but I'm going to give you your fair chance to convince me that you're not just standing for a prosecutor who laughed about putting parents in jail for their kids being truant. We're going to act like that's not the case. So, all right. So it goes on to say, it began with subtle racism and microaggressions, such as being seen as not likable or being called overconfident. And it escalated from there. No, those weren't racist. That wasn't racism and microaggressions. Being called not likable, that was actually by us. I'm not going to lie, y'all. That was the black people who were saying that. Because let me tell you the subtle difference, right? You all know how I feel about Barack Obama. I do not like this man's policies. He was an abhorrent president. His foreign policy was absolutely despicable. I mean, he militarized the police and then sicked them. He sicked them on black people, right? This is how I feel about Obama. But for every problem that I have with Obama, I can't lie and say the man's not likable. That's the hardest part. That's the worst thing about Obama is the man is so damn likable. But he's so bad. But you want to like him because he's funny and he's charismatic and his family's cool. And his daughter doesn't even like his policies, which makes her even cooler. Like, Michelle, you want to like Michelle? Michelle's so likable. Actually, I still kind of do like Michelle. I'm kind of like, I wish she didn't endorse Hillary, but I know for a fact she does not like Hillary, nor does she necessarily agree with everything Barack did. But nonetheless, they're a likable group of people. Okay? That's not Kamala. Kamala is not a likable person. When you start laughing, you have a long history of laughing at things you shouldn't be laughing at. You laugh at this idea that we should build more schools and not and less jails, right? She laughed at that. She was making fun of them in a chant saying, people walk around screaming, build more schools and less jails. And she laughed at that. Ha ha ha, yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it? Except for I still have to lock my doors at night. What? What does that have to do with building more schools, fool? You want to stop locking your doors at night? Maybe you should give people more opportunity. I know it's a joke for her, but that's real life. But you laugh about that. You laughed at the idea of jailing children's parents for their kids being truant, and the truancy that was being spoken about specifically in her area. The truancy that was that these schools experienced from these kids were by poor kids who had to take care of their siblings. Maybe their mother had to work a double that day to put food on the table. That's why these kids were missing school, because they can't afford to go to the doctor's office. Healthcare is way too expensive. So she was laughing at stuff like that. Laughed about smoking marijuana to this invisible album, this invisible Snoop Dogg album that hadn't even been recorded yet. After she is well known for putting people in jail for marijuana. You have a long list of reasons you are just not a likable person. There was nothing racist about that statement and about that conclusion. There was no microaggression. Kamala wasn't a likable person to black people, and then eventually white people caught on to that. Right? Can we agree with that? Can we agree that she was like Cory Booker? The thing that pisses me off about Cory Booker, I like Cory Booker. I don't like him. I don't like him as a politician, but he's a likable person. I have to put effort into not liking him. If I was just completely and totally ignorant when it came to politics, I would have to put effort into not liking him. Even Julian Castro, one of the ways that he had a lot of people fooled, and he's another person of color, Latino specifically, people liked him, even though I don't like his policy. Kamala simply was not a likable person. Period. Point blank. Let's go on and let's read the rest of this. Well, not the rest of it, but the parts that I feel are important, because it just gets redundant after a while. Now, and he also said that being overconfident, her being called overconfident was a racist microaggression, except for she was the one who came out and said that it might be a modest, but I'm a top tier candidate, right? And I knew I'd be attacked. I knew I was a top tier candidate. It might sound modest. No, what we would call that in the real world is overconfident, because you were not a top tier candidate for much longer after that. And yet you still carried yourself as if you were entitled to the top tier position. because you were being propped up. Which, oh, by the way, is also another hilarious. It's a hilarious reality, because like, as a black man who's actually experienced racism in a political sphere, in the progressive sphere, I know what racism really looks like, right? But I can't be propped up by every major media conglomerate and then scream racism when no matter how much I'm propped up, people simply do not like me. Right? You can't claim racism by the system when you're propped up and propped up and propped up and propped up. But it seems like the people who dislike me first and the most are the black people whose votes I thought I had in the bag. That doesn't make any sense. Well, let's continue. From the start, the article says, many had fair questions about Harris's policies, the platform she'd be running on, and her prosecutorial record, specifically in relation to people of color, as former district attorney in San Francisco and attorney general in California. Those were all very important questions, but nothing that would ordinarily be insurmountable for a candidate with her experience and pedigree. No. See, once again, self-defeating claims. Her experience and pedigree is putting people of color in jail, using prison slave labor, making sure that they stay in jail for longer to use that labor, falsifying evidence or withholding evidence in order for somebody else to stay in prison longer so that police officers would not be prosecuted for planting a weapon on somebody. I mean, the list goes on. Yeah, maybe for normal people, it wouldn't be that insurmountable. But Kamala's entire record is just abysmal. It's hypocrisy, and it's antithetical to everything she is supposedly claiming to run on. And what makes it worse is that she tried to turn, because this, it's a strategy. You turn your weakness into a strength. She tried to turn it into a strength by saying justice is on the ballot. You haven't even owned up. You know how this election could have turned out very, very different? You know what? I had a different mindset at that point. I thought being tough on crime was the answer because I consume the same propaganda from these various industries that I no longer take money from, that everyone else was propagandized by. But now, since gaining, more experience, since being put in a different office and seeing this from an objective view, I don't see the world the same way, and I'm very apologetic for the lives that I may have ruined directly or indirectly. And I want to work side by side with California's Attorney General and with various justice or judicial institutions across the country to right the wrongs from my past. That does not excuse anything that I've done. That does not give the lives back to anybody that I have, the lives back to anybody that I've taken. However, I want to work and move forward together, and I hope that you all can work and move forward with me and forgive me as I continue to work and improve myself. That would have changed everything. It would have changed everything, ladies and gentlemen. I think you all agree with that, right? It wasn't just the fact that she had an abhorrent past, but it was how unapologetic she was about her abhorrent past. That was the main problem. Most Americans are incredibly forgiving. I know it's this narrative that we aren't, but we are. It's actually, like, why do you think Hillary Clinton was even able to get as far as she did? Because everybody kept saying, well, she's not perfect. That doesn't make her bad. She's not perfect. She's not perfect. She's not perfect. They were forgiving her. Think about Elizabeth Warren. She's not perfect. Now, granted, those are white women, so I agree that is a little bit different. But even with Tulsi, she has a huge following now, and she wasn't perfect either. Cory Booker, people kind of just forgot about how bad he just did not build up any head of steam. But his past wasn't what held him back. It was just that nobody felt like he was a presidential material, if you will. Nothing to do with his past. Progressives might have felt that way, but the rest of the world had no idea. Like, they don't care about Cory Booker's past grievances, or not past grievances, but past problems. But you never attempted to reconcile yours, Kamala. That is the problem. Never once attempted it. So anything that comes out of your mouth, if you're going to disingenuously claim to be a progressive prosecutor, then I know that everything else coming out of your mouth was fake. Oh, give me a second. For whatever reason, we're having some issues. We back, baby. We back. I don't know why my camera froze, but like I said, it's probably because we was dropping that hot fire, y'all. That's what happened. So, I want to continue real quick. The article goes on to say, when her campaign began, many political pundits referred to her as Trump's nightmare. Some even went as far as to call her the next Obama or compare her to Shirley Chisholm. She was a woman of color with moderate policies and all the makings of someone who could have a broad appeal. But Kamala wasn't claiming to have moderate policies at first. She was claiming to have progressive policies. But okay, whatever. With the acclaim, so basically, when her campaign announced, many political pundits call her Trump's nightmare. That doesn't seem like she was a victim of racism to me. Seems like people were propping her up, actually. Interesting. With the acclaim and the surging support would also come strategic moves by her opposition to throw her campaign into disarray. Such things are typical in politics. However, the specific narratives used against Harris were anything but typical. Enter Kamala is a cop. Oh, this should be great. In an era where social justice and movements such as the Black Lives Matter enjoyed much needed visibility, Harris's opposition saw an opportunity to pounce. They criticized her record, her language, and her connections with the establishment by spreading exaggerated and often false information about who she was and what she stood for. At one point, it even appeared that social media bots were maliciously maliciously spreading tweets claiming she wasn't black enough and questioning her ethnicity. It's weird that you went to social media bots, because a lot of people were making that claim. Not necessarily that she wasn't black enough, but that she was very selective in when she wanted to invoke her blackness. That is a completely different thing, by the way. Harris's campaign struggled to find a strategic countermove for that narrative, which gained further traction when Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard attacked her over her prosecutorial record publicly at the Democratic debate in July. During that time, Harris's poll numbers dropped steeply. At one point, she was polling at 19%, while frontrunners Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden were polling at 12%, 15%, and 11% respectively. In fact, current Iowa caucus polling leader Pete Buttigieg was polling at a mere 3% in that same summer poll. Oh, it gets better. Many theorize that the drop-off in numbers was due to a confusing message being put out by Team Kamala. I think that a lot of people felt that way. But okay. She had been criticized by progressives for not supporting Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, and she had been condemned by moderates for not committing herself fully to being tough on crime Democrat. No, nobody said that. Nobody said that. Literally, have you ever heard any moderate make the claim that Kamala wasn't tough on crime enough? Where do people get this stuff from? People seem confused about where she stood. From the outside looking in, one could say both her and her campaign were flawed. Those people would be right, but you should also ask yourself what candidate in campaign isn't flawed. Nobody's saying that. We all know they're flawed. I don't understand. Tulsi Gabbard has been chided as a Republican plant for her consistent appearances on Fox News. Ironically enough, the same debate, which is the last debate, where Kamala had made this claim 3 times that week, she had went on Fox News as Brenda Vaughn, Tulsi's sister and assistant, if you will, campaign assistant, she called her out on Twitter over that. Says Pete Buttigieg has been called out for not properly addressing the history of police brutality against black people in South Bend, which is true. And Klobuchar has a prosecutorial record that's arguably worse than Harris's. That is not true, actually. That's not true. I looked it up. It's pretty bad, but it is not even close to... That would be like the way that... So basically, the problem with Harris's prosecutorial record is that when you're a black person who finally gets put into power, like we aspire to be in these positions so that we can finally do the right thing once we arrive. But along the way, a lot of people get derailed. But when it comes to the black community, if you can do your own community, the people that look like you, that have the same experiences as you, that have the same experiences as your parents, your grandparents, when you could put them through hell like that, oh man, imagine what you do to people who don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's what it is. Now he goes on to say, but none of these candidates face such coordinated attacks. None of them had their very identities so consistently called into question. Hold the fuck up. Sorry, y'all. Excuse my language. Sorry, mama, if you're listening. Did he just try to make the claim that Tulsi Gabbard never had her identity called into question? Because that's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like to me he was saying that Tulsi's identity had never once been called into question. Real quick, didn't Kamala brag about meeting with Modi? Celebrated Modi, actually. Was her Indian heritage ever brought directly into question like Tulsi's Hindu heritage was called directly into question? Interesting about that. Now, that's basically that's the key parts of the article, but I want to bring up the part that I specifically took issue with. Calling Kamala a cop is a racist narrative. But she's a cop. She's technically the top cop. Matter of fact, in her truancy video where she laughed at jailing parents for their kids' truancy, she even talked about the little badge you get, the little cop badge you get. Now, there's a DA right now in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's a black man. I wish I could remember his name. I can't remember it though. Who ran on being a progressive prosecutor and is a progressive prosecutor. Tiffany Caban ran in Queens, won but had it snatched away from her. Thank you, election fraud. Who also was running on being a progressive prosecutor, getting rid of the cash bail system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If either of them ran for president after, not that they would, or even ran for governor right after they were DAs, do you think that they would take offense to being called a cop? They're going to be like, yeah, I was a cop and I was a damn good one. I was a cop who looked out for the people. And we all know there's a police officer in every community like that who is just, I mean, I got a police officer in my community. Whenever he sees homeless people, you know, acting out because a lot of them have mental issues, which is how they end up homeless. Not rude to them. Hey, man, is everything okay? Do you need me to get you some food? Or are you having a bad day? Let's talk. Cop will grab a cup of coffee, get them some McDonald's and sit down and have a chat with them instead of just going all crazy on them. Because the only way you would take a cop, being a cop offensively, in my humble opinion, we know what the associated term is. But when people use that to attack Kamala, they were saying you embody all the negative traits associated with being a cop. You weren't a public servant. You were a servant to somebody, but it wasn't us. You were a servant to the corporate interests and the police unions that funded your campaigns. Calling Kamala was not defeated by racism. You can't, you know what's interesting? Obama was actually a victim of racism. Like, he was a victim of racism. He was a victim of xenophobia. He was a victim of bigotry. And he was able to conquer it without ever once mentioning the fact that he was black while he was running. I know a lot of people forget that. So why is it then that Obama can never mention his race, be a victim of racism, and not one time that black people feel the need to chime in and say, hey, And Obama, you're not black enough, dog. Not one time did you hear that from black people. We were like, well, man, he don't have a really bad record on hurting black people. Maybe there were complaints that he didn't speak about his blackness enough, but that was about as far as that went. Nobody ever questioned Barack Obama using his blackness only for a political advantage. Not one single time. Once again, this is coming from somebody who does not like Obama. But when we have readily available situations and readily available circumstances to measure up against, you have a black man named Cory Booker in the race right now, and not one time do I feel that Cory Booker has ever been, or his campaign ever been denigrated because of his race. But somehow, some way, because Kamala gets just throttled, her and Cory Booker are the exact same skin complexion. Why wasn't Cory Booker ever? You know why? Because let's be honest, right? Let's be real about it. For all the problems that we have with Cory Booker never ran away from being black. He might, embellish a little bit. He might embellish about his experiences, but he never ran away from being black. Kamala avoided being considered black for her entire political career. And then the moment that she thought she could use it to her advantage, she was black again. So you open yourself up to a certain line of criticism when you do that, from the black community specifically. And those are the ones who came at Kamala, the black community. That a lot of that information that Tulsi got was from the black community. Bits and pieces that had been put together over time by the black community who care about these issues, because they're the ones primarily affected by these issues. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all enjoyed that segment of Mikasa Sukasa. I'm very sorry about the technical difficulties in between, but we got it taken care of pretty quick. I would love to know what your thoughts are about this. Leave a like and a comment below, and always remember, more than anything else, people, find your balance. Peace. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell if you like that segment of Mikasa Sukasa. Of course, if YouTube is giving you trouble, as it always does, you can download the Rockfin app and follow us there. Also, if you want to continue to help our show grow, you can help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon and donate as little as $1. Really, anything helps. Other than that, always remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.